Hello, U.S. history students. I hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and that you're back feeling rested and ready to go. Thanksgiving is a holiday. The tradition of it, of course, goes back to the Pilgrims and 1620 at Plymouth Rock, but it was made a national holiday by Abraham Lincoln during the middle of the Civil War, as he was racked with his own personal grief and as the country was going through its gravest trial ever. In that context, Abraham Lincoln said, let's make it a national holiday to stop and give thanks to God. And so it's good that we did this, and we can give thanks for lots of stuff here. We're finally at this climactic point in the Civil War, certainly the most famous point, the Battle of Gettysburg, when in many ways the flames of war reached highest and hottest. Now, this is one of the two key turning points in the war, and again, they're happening simultaneously. In the Western theater, you have the Battle of Vicksburg that we learned about last week, and that same week in the Eastern theater of war, everything is pivoting here at the Battle of Gettysburg. So we're going to talk about what changed and what happened on that day. We'll get more into detail on specific battles than we will anywhere else, because this is the most fateful battle in American history, and we're going to always be on the lookout for God's story in the midst of this horrible curse. Okay, so our situation in the Eastern Theater of War in 1863, like I said last time, Robert E. Lee has been on a roll, all right? And Lee has had the hot hand. The Confederacy has, Lee's armies have won battle after battle against every general that the Union is putting forth in the Eastern Theater of War. At the same time, Lee recognizes that time is not on the Confederacy's side. All right, there are more and more Union soldiers being added to the ranks, especially after the Emancipation Proclamation. The influx of African American soldiers is coming in now. It's just like the Union is sort of still able to keep dumping in more men, material, supplies, equipment, everything, food. And there's just much more where that came from. And on the Confederacy, there just is not that same endless reserve of stuff that's needed to win the war. And so Lee is saying, while I have the hot hand, while it's in my ability to win and sort of press the matter, we must press the matter. Lee is also watching developments out west with the Vicksburg campaign. He's getting the sense of that, like General Grant is, again, kind of a pit bull who's not going to let go of this thing. And Lee is smart enough to look at a schematic map and say, I think Grant's going to get this one, and that's really not going to be good once we lose the Mississippi. And so what Lee wants is he wants to land a knockout blow, all right? He wants to go into Union soil, and not even like a border state like Maryland. Let's just go into Pennsylvania, right? Let's go into the heart of the American Revolution, and I want to win a major victory on Union soil and create chaos, panic across the North. Create the sense where people are afraid that like Lee's armies are going to go through and burn their homes down, and people are saying to Lincoln, get us out of this war. That's what Lee is hoping for, right? He wants something big, and he's thinking something big needs to happen here, because if I just sort of keep winning mid-sized, even minor mid-sized battles here the way it is, like at a certain point we're going to just run out of gasoline to keep moving this thing along. So we need something big to happen. That's our context. And so Robert E. Lee marches his army of Northern Virginia, as it was called, into Pennsylvania. And they meet up with a Union army led by a general named George Meade. We don't need to know Meade that well. Meade is okay. He's better than McClellan. How about that? We'll say Meade is not as good as Ulysses S. Grant, who's fighting in Vicksburg at this moment, but he's better than McClellan was. And Lee's army and Meade's army meet at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. There's nothing special about Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Lee does not go into the North saying, I must have Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's just a place where they happen to meet. It's a small town with a little college there. And it just, as it turns out, this is going to be the place where the two armies are going to fight out the most fateful battle of the Civil War, which is at the climactic, midpoint in the country's story. This is a 3-day battle, fought July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And on the first day of battle, when the two armies engage each other, it's a day of significant fighting. And in general, you'd say the Confederacy seems to have the upper hand in that the Confederacy is moving the Union Army where they want to move them. Right? They're sort of they are able to make the thrusts and push the Union Army. Now, the Union Army under Meade does the right thing, which is recognizing there is high ground, there are hills to the south of Gettysburg, and so they kind of allow themselves to get pushed back or retreat onto the high ground. Right, onto the sort of like it's not like steep hills, but onto the sort of elevated ground south of the city or south of the town, and they kind of line themselves up sort of like in a fish hook or like a U-shaped formation on this elevated ground. So like the first day is just sort of pushing the Union into that spot. That's day one. And everyone recognizes, all right, so this is going to be big. All right, Lee's in the north for a reason. And Meade says, we're going to have it out here. And day two, where it's like the Union is now kind of backed up against itself, right? Here's the Union lines, and a half mile behind them are other Union lines, sort of like, again, in this sort of U. So it's like, here we go. All right, this is going to be it. And can the Confederacy break the Union position? Can they break that Union Army? Can they send them scattering? And then the Confederacy can just run roughshod over this part of Pennsylvania and cause chaos and commotion. And I'd say, in general, we'd say day two of the fighting is, here we see this position, right? Here we see the Union position in the hills south of the city, of the town. And we see the Confederacy is sort of on the outside of them, surrounding them on three sides, sort of trying to break that Union position. And guys, day two of Gettysburg is just some wicked, wicked fighting, all right? It is like one frenzied attack after the next, after the next, after the next. And there's all kinds of famous sort of micro stories in this. I mean, we could just go all day telling these stories, especially like places like here, Little Round Top. There's some crazy stuff that happens there. There was some fighting up on Cemetery Hill that was just wicked. But I want to tell you one of these stories. I'll pick one, and I'm going to pick the one that involves Minnesotans. So we have a situation where along this area here in Cemetery Ridge, led by a general named Hancock. So Meade is a commanding general of the whole situation. Hancock has this area of the lines. One regiment of Union soldiers, under some poor leadership, gets themselves pulled out. All right, they sort of break formation and they pull out, and they actually get sort of wiped out. They get sort of slaughtered, pushed away by a Confederate army. And so now there is a roughly half-mile breach in the Union lines. And the Confederacy recognizes this. Confederate generals recognize there is a breach in the Union lines, all right? And if that breach is sort of like, and the Confederates send two regiments like charging into this breach in the Union lines. And if they're able to break through, they get into the Union rear, and then it's game over, all right? And so like everyone recognizes there's this fateful moment. This is late in the day. There's already been this crazy fighting all day long. General Hancock sees, here's our situation. There is a breach in the lines. There are two Confederate regiments, and that equals at least 1,500 soldiers, probably a little bit more than that, all right? And they are like quickly amassing for a charge, and they're moving in. And he says, where are my backups? They look around, and the backups are coming. They're coming from the south, but they are still 5 minutes away. They're like racing, but they're 5 minutes away. And Hancock says, I do not have 5 minutes. I've got like 1 minute here. And so he turns to one group that has sort of been fighting. It's the 1st Minnesota Regiment. He turns and says, who are you? And they said, we're the 1st Minnesota. And he says, where's all your men? And they say, this is all of them. Is a regiment that had started with 1,000 at the start of the war. By this point, 1863, at the late in the day of day two of fighting, there are 262 of them left. So he's like, where's all the men? They go, this is all the men. And Hancock says, I need you to launch a countercharge, a counter assault. You don't have enough people to hold that half-mile line, and so what you need to do is just charge into the soldiers who are attacking you. You're outnumbered 5-1. Hancock, describing this later, said troops had been ordered up. They were coming on the run, but I saw that in some way 5 minutes must be gained or we were lost. We need 5 minutes. I need 5 minutes for soldiers in here. One of the survivors from this counter-assault said, "Every man realized in an instant what that order meant. Death or wounds to us all. The sacrifice of a regiment to gain a few minutes' time and save the position." It's an insane thing. You're just told, make a suicidal counterattack because I need you to hold them up because we cannot hold this position. We need time. We need about 300 seconds. One essay I read about this, I just grabbed this, the charge to win 300 seconds. The author said, "On this day, at the closing of the day, there was no illusion that they might win. There was not any thought that they could throw back a force many times their own size. Not a one of them could have entertained the thought that this would end well for them personally." Guys, these were veteran soldiers. These weren't like rookies who were like, okay, can we win? Like, these are all people who've been in battle, right? They've lost most of their comrades at this point. They understand intimately exactly what's about to happen and what they're being asked to do. I suspect, though of course nobody can actually know, that there was only a silent and complete understanding that this thing must be done. So that 5 minutes might be won for the line and the reinforcements, and that their widows and children might be grown up in a nation once more united. They would have to do this thing. Then, as men, the 262 men of the 1st Minnesota followed their colonel as he ordered the advance, leading them himself from the front. They charged with fixed bayonets to win 300 seconds for the United States. Union and Confederate sources agree in this next point. There was no slacking, no hesitation, no faltering. The 1st Minnesota charged en masse, at once alone and together. 150 years later, those 300 seconds they won for the United States have proven timeless because it worked. They threw a wrench into the rebel attack, stalling it before the inevitable end. And it only cost 82% of the men who stepped forward. There's never been a regiment in American history that suffered a higher casualty rate than the 1st Minnesota did on that day. And that's just one of a half dozen stories, guys, of the craziness of Gettysburg, day 2. And we aren't even to day 3. At the end of day 2, if you can imagine this is here's a Union lines, and there's sort of a small slope going down here. All right, Union lines are behind this stone wall. The Confederates retreat at the end of day 2 back into these woods, back into that wooded line. And there's the thought among the Confederate brass, the Confederate generals, is, we gave them hell today. I mean, we just we gave them as good as we got. We kept landing punch after punch after punch, but the Union lines held. So let's fall back. Let's find a new approach. Maybe go back down to Virginia again, where we've got a winning record, right? We gave them hell, but we're exhausted after that day of fighting. And Lee is convinced, no, we have to have this decisive victory here. I have to ask them for one more day. We're going to do it again tomorrow. And so Lee decides to attempt one more assault. And he orders a division, it's multiple regiments, a division of soldiers led by General George Pickett, to march across that open field that we just saw. It's going to happen around lunchtime. He says, you're going to step out of the woods with about a mile long of soldiers, all right? And we got to make it across that field. There is no covering fire, all right? You're going to do it just out of straight guts, gumption, and it's totally against every rule of battlefield engagement. I mean, it's against every rule, but Robert E. Lee says, I've won battles by breaking every rule. Everything I ask these soldiers to do, they can do it, all right? They are incredible fighters, and the way I win is I break the rules and I can make it work for me. And so this is one more time when we're going to do this, right? We are just going to roll the dice again. I have to be aggressive. It's an audacious move. It goes against, like I said, every textbook rule, and in this case, Lee pays badly for it. This charge that we call Pickett's charge is annihilated. The Union positions are dug in, and they just take careful aim and obliterate the Confederate army coming at them. And it ends up Lee's army is hurt badly by this, just in terms of numbers. They're utterly demoralized. This is not an Antietam style. Well, we forced them sort of off of that position. It was kind of a tie. The attempt at Pickett's charge and the Union destruction of that assault makes this a decisive Union victory. Now Lee has his tail between his legs, and now he has to retreat back to Virginia. By the way, General Meade decides that he does not have it in him, or his soldiers don't have it in them, to pursue Lee and sort of chase Hector, hound them, sort of stay after them. And Lincoln says, then you're fired. He's going to replace Meade with Grant at the earliest possible convenience, because he's like, I need someone who's going to get after Robert E. Lee and not let him sort of keep escaping away. Because Lincoln says, you could have ended the war. All right, his army is demoralized and shot. I know you're exhausted too, but like, there's more of you than them. Stay after them, right? I mean, that could have ended the war. As it is, it's still a decisive victory. It is still Lee's first true tactical defeat. And it's a mistake that he regretted till the end of his days, Robert E. Lee, this Pickett's charge. Months later, so that's July 3rd. All right, July 3rd. July 4th, Vicksburg surrenders. July 3rd, Gettysburg is won. The war seems to have really pivoted. There's suddenly major momentum on the Union side. Months later, there's a cemetery at Gettysburg, and it's going to be an official memorial site. And Abraham Lincoln is invited to the cemetery to give a few remarks. He's just asked to give a few remarks. They say, we've paid this other guy, Edward Everett, to come and give a big speech, and it's going to be like a 2-hour speech, and he's going to be the big kind of bloviating orator. Lincoln, would you mind giving a couple remarks? And so Lincoln comes to Gettysburg, and in those few remarks, in about 2 minutes of speaking, he gives a piece of poetry to the nation and to us, summarizing, here's what's happening in this war, here's what's happening in our country, here's what our country means, here's what our Americanness means and what this is all about. And here's the task for us. And by us, I mean Lincoln speaking to his audience, and I mean us in terms of you, students, and me. His Gettysburg Address is a beautiful piece of writing that Americans cherish, rightfully. Your homework assignment is going to be to read an analysis of it and just to respond to that. And so there we have it. At the end here, we have the situation. How has the war now changed after Vicksburg and Gettysburg? Well, now the Union has even more to its advantage. It now has a winning streak. Lee has been defeated and is sent running back down to the South, and it's going to take a Union general who can really finish the job, which is going to be Grant, and William Tecumseh Sherman. We're going to still have that to happen, but things really have shifted here at this point. All right, guys. So thank you so much for listening through this today and your good work. I really do look forward to when I get to see all the scrapbooks, to sort of seeing the work that you've been putting in on all this. So yeah, otherwise have a great day. Take care, everybody. See ya.